After we have installed mechanically the heatsink, it's time to put in the two 8GB memory modules. Since I'm building here for myself a relatively inexpensive virtualization host, and I will be not, doing any data which is critical, I don't care about ECC. So if you are eventually interested or you must have an ECC memory, this motherboard, this Gigabyte one, which, you can watch the previous video where I described the motherboard in more detail. Anyway, so unofficially, I must emphasize this, it does support ECC non-buffered memory. So you might even buy some non-buffered ECC DDR3 memory and you might get lucky. Personally, I do not care about the data that much, what will be on this machine, so this is why I didn't even go the extra mile. Anyway, when it comes to memory, it's important to point out that they are the most sensitive when it comes to electrostatic discharge. So it's a good idea to keep them in their original packaging before you build them in. Now, as you see, this packaging is actually not anti-static. This is just so-called static dissipative. And personally, I prefer these anti-static bags. And this is why I'm keeping the modules in these anti-static bags instead. And before I take them out, I go to my heating system, which is grounded, and I will touch it to discharge myself really well, because you can, even nowadays, you can still mess up memory if you statically zap them. Now I have only two of these ballistics 8GB modules, which is, it's on the lower limit for building a virtualization host. At the beginning, it should be enough for the number of virtual machines I'm willing to run on this virtualization host. Since I'm installing only two of the RAM modules, then I will use the slot number 1, and notice that the slot number 2 is actually the middle one. So this is slot number 1 and this is then slot number 2. On modern systems, this should not really matter because the memory controller is anyway inside the CPU, but it's still a good idea to, put them in the right banks. I mean, when I started with IT, as an example, Sun was still a big player, and that's most probably why I still call like ZFS, Sun, ZFS, and so forth. Anyway, and in the case of the Sun hardware, you really needed to take care that you are filling them in the right banks. Otherwise, the system did not boot, or, best case scenario, it did not see the memory for that bank. A bit old school, so that's what I will do here as well. When you install the fan, there is just one thing what you should take care. I mean, first of all, that it should blow in the right direction. But then there is something that you should first look up, where is the connector for this pin header on the motherboard for the CPU cooler, and then you should rotate it such that you have plenty of slack in the cable to reach until this pin header. So on this motherboard, the CPU fan pin header is right here. So it means that I will rotate then the fan such that the cable is down here, and then it reaches the pin header. So the main idea behind this small retention clip here is that you just snap it into these holes on the fan. I can tell you it's really not an easy job. So now it's snapped back in, and actually what I spend quite a lot of time failing to put it on So yeah, take care that both on the bottom side and on the top side this retention spring is completely staying clear of the fins of the cooler, otherwise you're not gonna be able to close mechanically this thing here. You're gonna get close, but no cigar. So don't force it. Just be smart and learn from my mistake. So now we then have a motherboard. We have put in the RAM modules. We have put in the CPU, and on top of it the fan. Normally at this stage, if you have an extra power supply laying around, it's a good idea to do a bench testing when you just plug in some El Cheapo video card into one of the slots. You plug in your power supply and you just boot up the board to check that everything is fine. The two reasons why I'm not doing a bench test are the following. First of all, I don't have a power supply which is just lying around. That's one of the big issues actually. Second thing is that for the time being I do not have the right type of monitor because I sold my old monitor when I moved. I hope that it boots up, otherwise it would be a good idea to bench test it. However, there is something important what I need to point out. Namely, you should never ever bench test your motherboard and anything on this anti-static plastic. So when it comes to the case, normally this Fractal Design XL R2 case what I'm using comes with 3 of these large 14 centimeter fans made by Fractal Design. So yeah, I mean, they are not the quietest coolers, however, they are included in the price of the case, so I'm gonna just use them. So normally there is only one built here in the front, and then at the bottom of the case there is another one, so I already moved this from the bottom to the front, but actually I don't like it. And the third fan is here in the back side of the unit. So as I mentioned, they are included in the price of the case. At least my Fractal Design case came with the 3 fans. Then there is this Be Quiet power supply. This is a very nice cable management. There is already a DVD player and writer unit built into the case. What I will do, as I mentioned, because here they're gonna be the motherboard and we're gonna have 3 quad gigabit network cards which generate lots of heat. In the future, I'm gonna most probably install either a hardware RAID controller card or a host bus adapter. And also I'm gonna definitely need to install at least one InfiniBand card in this case, at least in the motherboard. Which means that I need some cooling to come from the side, you know, to cool the cards themselves, because if I would do that from the side fans, you know, blowing air like this, first of all, the air doesn't really have where to go. Second issue is I would need a huge fan speed to blow through the case. So this is why the side panel, which I've showed in the previous video, I mean, you will see it soon, have a hole already cut. And I will remove one of these fans and put it on the side panel. Actually, this Fractal Design case comes with a built-in unit where you can select 3 voltages. One of the voltages is the +5, another is +7, and then the full throttle +12 volt. You should never ever use these cheap voltage dividers on the 7 volt setting, because what they are doing is that they are just making practically a tap between the +5 and the so let us look at the Molex cable. So now it means that between the black and the yellow cable there is plus 12 volt normally. Between the black and the red cable there is normally plus 5. Now one might ask, okay, and what happens if I put a fan between the yellow and the red cable? Well, that is exactly when you're gonna get them practically plus 7 volt difference between the yellow and the red cable. However, the big issue with that is that if your fan, for whatever reasons, short circuits, then practically your plus 12 volt will go directly to the plus 5, and needless to say that can totally destroy the motherboard and everything. So this is why you should never use the cheapo things set on 7 volt, because this is what they are doing. This is why I prefer to then have these fans running at plus 5 volt instead of plus 7. So then if you open the front of the case, then right here is this thing what I just talked about. So this is the selector switch for the cooling fans, whether they are running at 5, 7 or 12 volt. I actually checked behind this switch, and it is indeed not doing anything else but just selecting the middle rail between the plus 12 and the plus 5 when you are setting it to plus 7, which, as I mentioned, is really dangerous. So this is why I'm gonna keep it on the plus 5 volt setting for the time being. And eventually, if I buy a more expensive fan controller unit, then I'm gonna build it in here in the front. With those ones, most of the time you do not have this issue of plus 7 volt, because they are using an actual electronics to drop down the voltage and not just switching between the rails. That's a no-go. By the way, normally there are 2 of these cages inside the case, and these cages can hold each one of them 4 hard drives, either 2.5 or 3.5 inches. I mean, personally, I'm never gonna have that much data to use these, so this is why I just removed these 2. And another thing is, as you notice, that if you remove now those cages for the hard drives, then there is a lot more clear path for the air to flow from the fans to the motherboard components, which really generate a lot of heat. Now, in order to remove one of those fans, which is now sitting here in the bottom at the front of the unit, then again you just open the front. By the way, even the front case have a soft thing on it, which is definitely dampening the noise which is coming from the components when they are spinning. I like this very much. The lower the amount of noise, the more cool you are, the less stress it's making on you. To get the fan out, you just push on these places here, which are shown like a play button on an old CD player. Then they come out. We're gonna do that on the bottom as well. And now the whole thing can be nicely opened. And we're gonna see all this dirt and tumbleweed, and oh my god, I have to clean this. Anyway, so there is a small plastic tab on top which you push down, and then you can just pull forward the whole unit, which contains the 2 coolers. And once you get that, then now we can easily remove one of the coolers. Oh my god, everything is just dirty. Let me clean it. So now here we have then one of the fans removed. So this was on the bottom, and also I cleaned up the poor thing because it was full with dust and dirt. There is still some dirt on my table. This unit then will be built back into the front of the case with a single fan, and the other fan then will be built into the side panel. Regarding the power, I already cable managed the power supply such that I have the power cord coming out at the right position where it will plug into the motherboard. And also this power connector, which is then feeding the CPU in the newer motherboards. This is then also coming through that rubber grommet here. On the back side of the case, I also did an awesome wire management with some Velcro tape. For me, it's good enough. Main thing is that the cables are not flapping in the breeze. So this is then the Molex power connector here, and this is again the 8-pin power connector going then to the motherboard for the plus 12 volt for feeding the CPU. Since I completely removed the drive cages from here, it means that even though I don't have drive cages, I still need to put in at least 2 SSDs. And later, if I put in a host bus adapter, then even multiple cheap SSDs, if I'm willing to test the Sun-derived ZFS file system. What I had in mind was that I checked the SSDs are rather thin and they fit just nicely here in the backside below the case or the cover. So I might just put them here and then push the SATA cables through these rubber grommets. We will see whether they fit or not. So then here is the side panel to the case. Then there is already a hole cut on the side exactly where the PCI Express boards are sitting. So Fractal Design definitely knew what they are doing. There is this sticker mat here. This is covering the this cutout, this grill. So we have to remove then this sponge material, which is of course then was to dampen any noise. And then we're gonna put in this into this cutout here. And I will put it in as you see it now, so it then blows air towards the PCI Express cards, which are then will be sitting here, of course. So after I remove then this side cover, for those of you who are willing to buy one of these cases and are interested of what is the material, so on this small portion of the side panel, there is a rather thick, soft, spongy foam material to hold back the noise. And this is put on top of an about 3mm thick epoxy or bakelite. I don't know, it's some sort of black plastic. Of course, we have then the 4 screws, which I will use to put in this fan, which I also removed, so it was in the front of the case. And by the way, this noise dampening material, which is all over the 2 side panels, is actually a different material compared to this soft sponge. So it's a somewhat thinner material. It's about 4 or 3 millimeters, and it's really like stiff. It looks like, you know, like reminds me of something like a carbon fiber material. I don't know what it is, but most probably they have optimized it to improve the noise dampening as much as possible. Here is then this 14 centimeter fan, nicely screwed in. It fits just fine. So yeah, again, good design from Fractal Design. Now removing this side cover here and putting the fan in the side panel, of course, will mean that there will be a little bit more noise seeping through this hole, and also the fan will directly transfer some of the vibration to the side panel. However, as I mentioned, the PCI Express cards are server grade and you just cannot really whistle away or get away with without a cooling. That's why I need to build this thing into the side panel.